So now I'm going to say, hello and welcome back to the Real Life Podcast, Season 2. It's Season 2. It was always going to be Season 2. I don't know what you mean. It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah. I've had other stuff on, funnily enough. I made my own film, which, funnily enough, has altered the order. I saw Michael last night, and Michael's here, by the way. Say hi, Michael.
Hi, guys.
There you go.
Again.
There's Michael.
I'm back.
Co-host extraordinaire. I saw Michael last night, and I told him what is going to be bottom of my list in what we're doing today, and then I thought Michael would be like, yeah, no, fair enough, and then you started mentioning some stuff about it, and then it got me thinking even more about the process I just been through. What we said okay, well, it'll become clear.
I'll come back to
it. It got me thinking about the process that I've just been through and the newfound respect I have for it. So today is another Fringe special. You know how last year I was like, we'll have a crowd? We've actually lost crowd members since the last Fringe episode because we had one person lying on the floor. He's not here anymore.
There was space on the couch.
There was space on the couch.
He just chose to start.
I think it's because, okay, I'm going to be honest about this. He knew he would need the bathroom at some point during this, and go he did. I did edit out an audible flush at some point, but I think he was like, I don't want to interrupt the flow of the couch, so I'll lie on the floor. Anyway, today we are doing something off the back of the big cinema event of the year, Barbenheimer. I will be talking about Barbie at some point soon.
I can't wait for the next, because clearly synergy is the new thing. That's what
absolutely.
That's what all the studios are going to be doing.
Yeah, so trying to release things on the same.
We're going to have 5 to 10 years of synergy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait for a 12 Angry Men remake and Deadpool 3 to come out in the same day, which would work really well.
It would actually.
But I don't want it to because I don't like the concept.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I could do without every trip to the cinema being 6 hours.
Exactly.
Because I did spend 6 hours in the cinema watching both of them.
I've still not seen Barbie.
Have you not?
No.
It is worth it. It is worth your time.
I know.
But off the back of Oppenheimer, it obviously had to fit into my Nolan ranking somehow. And so I thought, well, what better idea than get Michael back for the rebirth of this podcast after
the rebirth of the podcast,
the repeat
of an episode.
The repeat of an episode, yeah. Because I've already done 16 of these. That's a lot of ideas I've run out of. I don't think I've done an episode since the Oscars, so that was in March. So it's been a while. But I thought we would do our complete Christopher Nolan ranking, 12-1. With Oppenheimer now out, because it's now going to be another 3-4 years before the next one, so it makes sense. I will say this about my list: the order around the middle particularly could change on any given day, depending on how I'm feeling. I've gone on
numbers 2 to 6 for me.
Yeah,
pretty interchangeable.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I thought this when I was doing it. I think numbers 1 to 5 or 6 are perfect. I love them all to bits. But I've numbered them accordingly just based on how, because I've seen them all twice, right, 3 times.
Yeah.
So at that point, it just came down to rewatch value.
Yeah. Fair. I mean, they do change. What they are as a film changes to me the more I watch them. So a caveat on that: the way we're going to do this is we're both going to start at 12, and we will say what our 12th ranked film is, and then if they're not the same, we'll say what our 11th ranked film, and we will keep going until we have both said one film.
And that way we only discuss each film once.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than going, we've already done this, but now let's hear your side of the thing. We'll do it. Both films at once, and we'll both discuss them.
It'll be confusing, but we'll just go through our rankings at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Just to double, really make it sure and hammer it home. So let's crack into this because I'm aware this may take time. If you've got time, by the way.
Splendid.
Good. This is a good way to spend it because I don't know how long this is going to be. I only get 3 hours of podcast space a month from my supplier, so it's better be...
Does that build up from March, though?
I wish. It doesn't carry over. Just get an email
hours.
being like, so, I've got a lot of space for you. Let's start then. What is your number 12 Christopher Nolan film?
My number 12 is Insomnia.
Okay.
You?
My number 12, and it's worth saying as well, I don't think any of these films are bad.
No.
I think they're all good in different ways. My number 12 is The Dark Knight Rises.
Damn.
Fighting.
Okay.
Okay, what about your 11?
11 is Following.
Okay, my number 11 is Following.
There we go.
I was originally going to have this as 12, and then I thought about what you said last night about it having subtext, and then I thought about what I've just done with making a film. And knowing that this was shot over the course of weekends over a year with just him and his mates on a budget of $6,000, it made me have a lot more respect for it in terms of what he was actually able to accomplish and create based on a very limited amount of filmmaking process.
Yes.
That's my take for Following. I think there is a lot of good stuff under the hood. I think it does things cleverly. We already spoke last night about the interview where Nolan, talks about using the hammer instead of the gun.
Instead of a gun.
Because you can never make it look
for a fake gun.
You can never make it look real on a low budget.
Yeah.
All that kind of thing I think is very
and things like there's one scene in the film where he managed to borrow a dolly for a day. And that scene is very well shot, and there's a lot of panning shots and everything, and it's just and then it goes back to the shaky handheld.
Yeah.
And it's just you realize it's $6,000. I mean, when it comes to making a film, that's nothing. So he's just sort of doing what he can.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do exactly what we did last time, and every time we've done a film ranking list, which is you're going to talk more about the actual making of the film.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm going to talk about mimetic theory. So, following, there's been quite a lot of papers written about it retrospectively, because after Nolan became a recognizable kind of household name. So the analysis that I saw following, which I'm going to faithfully butcher and regurgitate, was that the main character in Following, who is never named in the film but is credited as Bill,
right. Okay.
has a disturbing kind of fixation on random strangers. So he'll follow people, and he has rules, which is that he'll never follow the same person twice, and he'll never follow one person for too long. That changes with Cobb, who shares a name with the protagonist in Inception, which I will come back to that, I'm sure. Yeah. But the theory behind mimetic theory is that it sounds hippie-ish when I say it in a way that because I can't remember how it was explained to me. Right. But it's that no one essentially feels complete, and they try to complete themselves by modeling their lives on the perceived completeness of others. So Cobb's very well dressed, he's very tailored, he's very well spoken, he seems to be getting ahead in life in a way that Bill feels he isn't. And what the film's called Following, because not only does Bill follow Cobb, he starts to model aspects of his own life based off of things Cobb does, and once him and Cobb start interacting, things that Cobb directly tells him to do. So Cobb tells Bill to clean himself up, he gets a new suit, he gets a haircut, stuff like that. It's in Bill's nature. He tries to assume the likeness and the character of Cobb, because he thinks Cobb is this complete, self-sufficient, self-actualized person, and he's trying to get there. He doesn't see that. The really interesting part for me, and why Following isn't the bomb, is because of the flip side of mimetic theory, which is mimetic doubling. Okay. So Cobb, the twist of the film is that Cobb's been fucking with Bill the whole time. Yes. There's this character called the Blonde who has been blackmailing Cobb and his associates. The associates are kind of the faceless villains of the film until the end twist, where it's revealed that Cobb's been in cahoots with them the whole time. And Cobb's trying to get Bill to assume his likeness, dress like Cobb, act like Cobb, speak like Cobb, so that he can then tell Bill to kill the Blonde and pin it on Bill. But a really interesting moment in the film for me is when Cobb finds out that Bill has slept with the Blonde. Yeah. Because he expresses a genuine anger, and it's at no point in his plan does he need to express that anger towards Bill for sleeping with the Blonde, but it's a subconscious response of his psyche that feels itself being infringed upon, and he doesn't like that. Yeah. Cobb is also that's kind of the neat part of the film for me is Bill follows Cobb and models his life on it, but consciously in the manipulation, but subconsciously in the rejection. Cobb's been following Bill the whole time as well. Yeah. And I say following as in modelling. Yes. Assuming the characteristics.
That's one of the best things about this is the sort of double meaning of this title is because there is a lot of shots of people following each other, but there feels a little bit like not worship, but as you say, modelling, that kind of idea of kind of taking someone else's lead on an issue. It's the first time for me that, obviously it's the first time for anything, but it's the first time that Nolan looks at the sort of duality of man, I think, in terms of the flip sides of both things, like you were mentioning there, with the fact that, you know, Cobb basically sends the blonde to have an effect on Bill, and then is devastated when that effect is taken too far.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff in it about...
Like Cobb knows that Bill's assuming his identity. Which
Yes.
is the crux of his plan.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about the blonde, so they break into the blonde's flat, and there's a bunch of things scattered about for Bill to find. And Cobb's not saying like, oh, she's a fox, she's like this attractive person, trying to get Bill to be infatuated with her, and then he's annoyed.
Yeah.
Like you say, when they sleep together.
Yeah.
And then that's the annoyance comes from his subconscious. And it's very neat.
I think the reason why it doesn't bottom for me, I think he's a better filmmaker by the time The Dark Knight Rises comes around, for sure. But I think there's a beauty in the simplicity to it. And I think actually as well, the fact that it was on black and white meant that this idea of taking on other people's ideas, taking on other people's forms, has so much more impact, because sometimes it is visually difficult to separate one from another.
Yeah.
The following shots, were they on the back of each other sometimes, because they've got quite similar builds, Bill and Cobb, there's a little bit like these two are interchangeable.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea. I like the fact that, you know, this is a story about two different people, you know, what they think is two different ends that they're going for, but actually they look very similar.
I think that following, obviously it's his first film, it comes up a lot in Memento particularly.
Yeah.
Because Memento, I think, was his big chance with a big budget, and I think a lot of directors, when they get their first big chance with their first big budget, try to kind of jam in a lot of the themes that, if they are successful, will go on to define their career, because it's their first big film and they think it's their first chance.
Yeah.
That's there in Following as well. And there's a theme of reconciling your outward and inward selves in Following that comes up, that's going to be a massive driver of Memento's storyline, and it's going to be a massive thematic element in pretty much every piece and pretty much every film that Nolan turns out.
Right.
And it starts here, and it's done well here, and I really like that.
I'm kind of with you. I think, like, as far as first efforts go, particularly on as a restrained budget as that is, and the way it's like,
Well,
you know, it took a year.
It's shot in black and white because they couldn't afford.
Because they couldn't afford any sort of colour camera, yeah.
Sort of colour camera.
And
that had any sort of decent resolution.
Yeah, but what I love about that is to just go, how can we work that into making the story better, and not just use it as, like, not have it as a disadvantage, something we can't do, but like actually make it, you know, use it as an effect.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. We'll move on then.
Number 10.
What is your number 10?
My number 10 is Tenet.
Okay. My number 10 is Interstellar.
We can come back to that.
I just sort of reclined slightly there, not because I was proud of what I did, but just because I thought Michael's arm might extend to my face. Yeah, all right, we'll come on to that. What's your number 9?
Number 9 is The Dark Knight Rises.
Okay. My number 9 is Insomnia, so we will do Insomnia and then we will do The Dark Knight Rises. Really like... Yeah, flip over the sheet. I really like Insomnia. I think there's a lot to it that is really clever. I think it's a formative film for Nolan. I think it's a developmental film for him. That's why it's a bit further up on the list for me. Like, I think it's a film... Like, it's the first time that he shot a plane, for example, that kind of thing, which then becomes obviously a huge theme in terms of everything. There's so much to it. I think one of the things about it is I think it might be my favourite Al Pacino performance ever. I think he's really, really good in that. He's really compelling. I like...
Not a fan of The Godfather?
I like The Godfather. I just don't like it as much as everyone else, but that's because I wasn't raised on it or anything like that, so I don't have the same connection with it. Like, the first time I watched The Godfather, I was like, this is just really slow. And then I was like, oh, right, no, I get it. Yeah. I think the idea of Insomnia, you know, the sun never sets idea, the fact that the landscape is very much fighting against them this whole time. It's a very
well-chosen title again.
It's a really well-chosen title again. And I think Robin Williams is really creepy. I think...
well, that's another pattern that Nolan's going to do for pretty much his whole career is take either established actors and put them in a new environment, like he did with Robin Williams and Al Pacino.
Yeah.
Or he's going to take pretty much unknowns and put them into the spotlight, like he did with David Dastmalchian. Yeah. Or Tom Hardy, even, you could argue.
Yeah. I think the music is an underrated part of this. I've forgotten who did it, but it's a really sort of like eerie underbelly type score that rises from, the same way that like they have this problem with like the fog around the lake house and everything that comes up. I think the music does the same kind of thing, and that it sort of like rises up from below. It's weirdly one of the more sort of just linear stories that Nolan tells. Like, it's not quite as ambitious as the rest of them, but I still like, I mean, the thing again is it's very similar to the original that it is based off. It is a remake.
Yeah,
I think it's
Norwegian
Alfred Skjold-Bjorg or someone Skjold-Bjorg.
Stellan Skarsgård.
Yeah, that Stellan Skarsgård's within, and it is very similar to that, and that's why I can't have it too high up as much as I like it, because it is a remake and it is similar to the original, but it again feels like Nolan going, okay, let's just test all the clever shit I can do and push it.
So I disagree with you on the remake stance.
Okay.
So it's a remake of a Norwegian film, but it's repurposed to Alaska. Both of them are set during Arctic summer.
Yeah.
So the sun doesn't set. Story time. When I was writing my notes last night and this morning, because I watched all of these films when you said you wanted to do this podcast at the start of summer, but then obviously you were down south, I was up here, yada yada yada. So I frantically made notes the other night. But when I was watching like video essays and reading articles on the films, just to kind of remind myself, because I knew I didn't have time to watch them, I did like the earliest films, because those are the ones that I didn't know at all. So I have really good notes on like Following, Insomnia, Memento, Batman Begins, and then I have all the films that I really like, which are like the later ones that are just like special to me because I got to see them in cinema when they came out and like all the yada yada. So like I might actually have way more to say on the films that I don't like as much.
That's fine, honestly, because I've got a ton to say on the other stuff. I haven't written anything. Michael's come very prepared, and it's sort of thrown me off. Normally, I sit here with but it's more than I've done. Normally, I sit here with like pages and pages of notes. Like when I'm doing a solo episode,
that's why I was
I
scared,
script all of
That's
it.
why I was scared, and I didn't.
Like I'm just sat here now and being like, I'm going to listen back to this and go, you didn't say the main thing that I wanted to say. So, fire away.
There are a lot of differences between Nolan's version of Insomnia and the original Norwegian.
Okay.
Which I would argue enhance the film. It's like a new production of a good play.
Right. Okay.
It's not like the typical Hollywood remake. So in Nolan's typical fashion, shots tend to be quite plain. There's one focus in the shot. The lighting's quite natural. They're not very flashy in ways that a lot of directors will indulge in.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same with the character work in this film. So Al Pacino's character, I can't remember his bloody name. He's a watered down version of the Norwegian one.
Right.
So the Norwegian is a lot grittier. So in Nolan's Insomnia, there are advances made by a young girl towards Al Pacino, and these are two LA detectives gone to Alaska to investigate a murder. But there are advances made by a young girl towards Al Pacino, and he specifically turns her down. In the Norwegian one, he fantasizes about having sex with this young girl, this underage girl.
Okay.
In the Norwegian one, he hits on the hotel owner. In the Nolan version, he turns her down, and he's a perfect gentleman.
Right.
He's a lot less rough. There's also a dog that has to be shot to retrieve a bullet for a plot point in the film. In the Norwegian one, he straight up kills the dog. In the Nolan one, the dog's already dead. So he's a lot more of a gentleman there.
Sure.
But Nolan adds a new element that's not present in the Norwegian one, which has the same effect. It's just more sanitized for a larger studio audience.
Sure.
Which is that Al Pacino's character is under investigation by internal affairs for police corruption. He planted evidence on a previous case to convict someone that he saw as absolutely guilty, but there wasn't enough hard evidence.
Right, okay.
What happens in the film is they're sent to investigate Robin Williams, who was given a role as the villain, which I think was a great casting. And Al Pacino and his partner are chasing after him in the woods, and Al Pacino thinks he's shooting Robin Williams, but he accidentally shoots his partner. But the investigation adds a new layer to it, and so the investigation from internal affairs has the same thematic effect as the debauched actions in the Norwegian original, which is like, this is a bad guy. He's a fucking terrible guy. But he's in conflict with himself and with Robin Williams' character. I think it's like Finch.
Yes.
I was thinking Filch, but that's Harry Potter. I think it's Finch.
Al Pacino out of bed!
So, and that puts so when he accidentally kills his partner, Robin Williams witnesses that, and that puts them into kind of an unintentional alliance.
Right.
And the thematic heart of the movie is why, and the way in which Nolan tells it to us is why can't he sleep? Robin Williams, who's a murderer, knows he's a murderer and philosophizes the morality of that after the fact.
Right.
Sleeps perfectly. Sleeps amazingly.
Yeah.
Al Pacino is wrestling with himself because he believes himself to be a good man. He believes himself to be a good cop and a good man and a warrior for truth and justice and yada yada yada. But his actions are so far removed from that. So he plants the evidence in the previous case. He kills his partner. His partner was likely to testify in this corruption investigation, which adds another element of how accidental was that shot.
I will say there is a shot that describes perfectly exactly, and it's lots of shots, but every time Al Pacino is going to sleep in the hotel room, the blinds that they have are the ones that leave like little slits of light coming through. So it's not like he doesn't ever commit, it feels like, to going to sleep, because he's always letting light come into his room. And so every time he sits up, that like stripe effect is on his face. Like literally the light and dark on him at the same time.
In the dark.
And it does it every single time he wakes up, or wakes up, tries to go to sleep, and that's there.
So Robin Williams' character sleeps perfectly because he is aware of the fact that he is truly gone. He believes that he can bend the objective truth of the world to his whims at any time. Al Pacino does not believe that, but thinks that he's on the right side of it when his actions are so far removed. So in the final climax of the movie, when he shoots Robin Williams, he gets shot himself. He's bleeding out on the steps. It's very cinematic, final redemption, moments from death. That's never been done before. And the town sheriff of the Alaskan town that they're in, says he confesses everything to her, and she says, "No, why would I tell him that? I can cover it up for you." And he says, "No, don't do that." So he finally reconciles the outward impact that he's had on the world with his perception of himself as a good person.
Yeah.
And then, even though it's death, he finally, for the first time in the goddamn film, gets some sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like it, basically.
Yeah, good. Because I like it too. I really enjoy it. Like, I think it's got a lot of rewatchability, actually. Out of the early Nolan films, it's really got like I wouldn't sit down and go, I'm going to watch Following. But I could see myself going, I'm not watching Insomnia tonight. And I think part of the reason is that, it is essentially a two-character story. It is them playing off each other. But by the same token, this is why I like the Al Pacino performance so much, is because I think to wrestle with the idea that to be constantly fighting off the notion that you are exactly what you are trying to stop. It feels a bit like his audition for Batman. That's kind of what Insomnia feels like to me. Going, okay, here is a character. He is seemingly striving for good, but has a history and a side of him which is inherently not the same. Can he be the person in charge of, taking on this mission, taking on this person who is evidently very much on the dark side, on the side of, too far gone, accepting what he is. And I think there's a panic to Al Pacino that I don't normally see him have. He's normally quite a sort of straight-faced, stoic, kind of unmoving figure, but I think in this there's a sense of worry that I see on him that I don't normally see on Al Pacino's face, which I think is really, really effective. And again, advancing as well on the practical effects. Like, there's not much CGI in this at all. The shots of the plane flying over the Alaskan snowy, they're beautiful. They look really nice. The whole thing looks great. But I think the problem is not my favourite character reconciles themselves in a Nolan film.
No.
That's the thing. Speaking of characters reconciling things, let's do The Dark Knight Rises.
Right, this one's on my phone.
Okay.
Let me get this one.
Now, initially, when I first saw it, in context of the trilogy, I was quite moved by the end of The Dark Knight Rises, right? I've since revisited it, and it pisses me off. And I'll tell you why. Because in Inception, the top is spinning, and there's a little shudder, And Nolan and Lee Smith sat in the editing booth go, that looks fucking awesome. Like, we have got them. Like, we've nailed them. And in this, you know, I've seen people try and say that last scene is not happening and that it is Alfred's dream. Mm-hmm. But there's too much telling you that it is real. It is far too overt, and that may well be what Nolan wanted, to go, you know what, this time I want people to have a closure, I want them to have an ending. But I would much prefer it to be my interpretation. I think, you know, the autopilot was fixed 6 months ago. What's the name on it? Bruce Wayne. Okay, right. You should use a real name. Robin. I like that. Like, all this stuff, it's the first example on Nolan's work in my head where his story completely lets him down. I think because he brings attention to the way he can manipulate time in his films before this, I think we're really, really aware of it this time. And I think there are several jumps and shifts where we go, well, how do you get there then? Like, how did this bit happen? Like, where did he come from here? I don't have a problem with him not being Batman for ages again. I think it makes sense. I think it's like, you know, he really is battling with actually coming back. But that ending would have had so much more impact to me if, you know, the images hadn't have been telling me exactly what was going on. And people trying to argue that it can be interpreted. The rest of The Dark Knight isn't clever enough for me for that to be the ending of that film. I like Bane. I think Tom Hardy's really good. But there is...
it's just
Mr. Wayne.
I love the whole that's a big point. I like Bane.
But loads of people don't like Bane, but I like Bane.
People don't like Bane?
No, well, because I think they were going, well, I wanted the Joker back. Obviously, you can't have the Joker back. And I think they did well to deal with Heath Ledger not being there. Anne Hathaway's annoying. Why does she speak exclusively in sexual puns? It's really annoying. The Dark Knight is where Nolan doesn't disguise his exposition. His exposition in The Dark Knight is exposition. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. And there is several times when Bane is kicking the living shit out of Batman and he's just saying everything and it's all flooding out all the time. And I think these fight scenes would have had so much more impact if I'd been drip fed this shit up until now, and to just dump it on me while I'm supposed to be watching a power dynamic play out, I think is overloading. And I think that there's just a lot in this film that feels a little bit rushed. Having said that, the visuals of Wally Pfister I miss so much. I miss Wally Pfister shooting movies. I think it is a film that uses its cinematography to tell its story. I think it is really beautifully shot. I think the whole ending sequence with the stadium crumbling in on itself, I think it looks amazing. But there's just some stuff in it, and I think it is noticeable as well within the fight scenes. There's some stuff that just goes on, and I don't see the point of it other than a fight scene. The fight scenes in The Dark Knight and in Batman Begins tell you loads without using any words at all, and there's a lot of them where the physicality is telling me absolutely nothing whatsoever. There's no John Wick happening in this. You know in John Wick where it's like its language is fighting,
yeah,
and you understand things about characters through what you learn through them fighting each other. I don't get that in The Dark Knight Rises, and there's a lot of it. So too much of it is just a bit empty for me.
Okay, here's where you're wrong.
Okay.
So I think the problem you're having is viewing The Dark Knight Rises in isolation.
In emotional context with the three, I was moved by the end because I like the idea that Alfred has the dream, but I would have much preferred to just Alfred have the nod, not cut to Bruce Wayne, and us just go. And the detail is he puts the credit card back in his jacket. He's not going to pay for it because he knows Bruce is going to pick up the tab, and we could tell that. It's like it is just going like. For those at the back, what's just happened is Bruce Wayne is sat in a corner. Another great bit of voice bending from Cillian Murphy as well, by the way.
Voice bending?
He sounds different to Crane in Batman Begins when he's on top of the pile of crap being the judge.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't sound like Cillian Murphy.
It's just
does
the
it?
sentencing. It's on trial.
It's just this is Bane has no authority here. Anyway.
But right, fuck it, right. Okay, so what The Dark Knight Rises is the final. So again, like I said, there's a thematic through point in all of Nolan's works, which is the duality of actions versus self-image.
Right.
And the idea is that a protagonist can never be truly good if they don't have a reconciled image with their actions. They're not self-actualized with their material impact on the world. Bruce Wayne's a prime example of that, and I wanted to come back to this in Batman Begins, but I'll just say it now because it's a big part of Batman Begins.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne and Batman are different characters.
Yeah.
They're different characters
Absolutely.
completely. And the problem with Al Pacino in Insomnia or Lenny from Memento is they're bad people convincing themselves they're good people.
Right.
Bruce Wayne is a good person convincing himself he's a bad one. Batman is this stoic force of nature,
what he's striving to be.
Hero, yeah. But it's not that Batman hides Bruce Wayne. To him, the guy, Bruce Wayne hides Batman.
Right. Okay.
And that's what Rachel sees at the end of Batman Begins. And that's what Bruce is finally able to realize at the end of The Dark Knight Rises.
Okay.
Bane in this manner represents an equally visceral kind of spiritual force, in that he represents the kind of the idea of the League of Shadows is that we live in a Faustian civilization where everything's built upon short-term gain at the expense of long-term spiritual health.
Sure.
The League of Shadows is that incarnate, and the idea is that every so often they have to step in and kind of, trim the verge of humanity. So, Sodom and Gomorrah, ancient Rome, Atlantis, fucking Babylon, all of these ancient societies. The idea is that they're the ones who took them all down. Because they become corrupt or whatever. I don't know. Irrigation is corrupt. I don't fucking know what to tell you. So Bane in this manner, so Ra's al Ghul represents the kind of that on paper. The Joker is something completely different. He's anarchy incarnate, which we'll get to, I'm sure. Bane is this kind of mutilated, thrashing out, kind of twisted version of the League of Shadows,
right?
Where it just kind of turns to, so from a thematic perspective, when you have Batman trying to represent order and good and objective truth, Bane comes in and muddies the picture, saying like, no, we're done, like this is over. But the brilliant fact is that that's not what they're doing at all. They're destroying Gotham not because it's the League of Shadows' role, but because Marion Cotillard's character wants revenge for the death of her father.
Right.
So it's an innately hollow movement. It's like it's like from Heart of Darkness, a paper mache Mephistopheles, a hollow devil. I'm not explaining this very well, but at the end of the film, when Bruce defeats Bane with the help of Anne of Catwoman, who does have an important role as this, because
absolutely,
she kind of replaces Rachel.
Yes. In
terms of reconciling kind of the masculine and feminine aspects of Bruce's life, and it's just about bringing yourself into a spiritually healthy state that Bruce hasn't had since the death of his parents. And it's hard to not cover all three movies here because thematically it's one story. I do think that whenever Christopher Nolan collaborates with his brother on a script, things tend to get bloated. Yeah. I think that's unfortunate. I think his brother has a lot to add, but I just don't think he's able to. I think he'll take twice the time to say the same thing. Yeah.
Well, that's something else I wanted to touch on. Is there are story beats in this that and we will absolutely come on to the line from Tenet, which is about every Christopher Nolan film ever, which is, you don't try to understand it, feel it. There is too much in this that you're just meant to go along with. This isn't mine, right? This is Jack Howard, but he makes the point of Bane coming in and going, I have a letter here from James Gordon. And we're supposed to go, oh, cool. But what actually everyone does is, well, how do we know it's real? Because he might as well just go, it says he likes to drink piss. And we might as well just go along and believe him, right? There's stuff like that where I think this sequence of events, though each thing is undoubtedly meaning something, and I can see in each scene, I can see what the theme is and where they're going with it and what they're trying to do. I get it. But it feels like a consecutive sequence of of different ideas that are played out rather than a linking through line through all of them. And
No, but that James Gordon scene's a terrible example, though.
well,
That's the undoing of the lie that was told at the end of The Dark Knight.
yes, but
Which is the whole impetus of why there's a third movie, because the second movie ended on a lie.
yeah, but so Gordon.
It's a false reconciliation.
It is a completely false reconciliation.
Which is why Bruce goes into hiding, because he knows, the same way Al Pacino knows during this in Insomnia, that he knows deep down, despite doing objective good, that it was done wrong.
Okay, I see that. I don't think the actions of Gordon make up for that, though. That's why I think, this whole like he basically goes and sacrifices himself, but for a reason that is really, really like convoluted and unclear. He's be like, we're not going on the ice, so kill you then. And we're supposed to, and if
bearing
Crane,
in mind,
if
like
Crane,
2 scenes before that, the FBI agents got hung from the bridge, so I think he's trying to avoid a spectacle.
Clearly, but if Crane doesn't go death by exile, then he's fucked, because it's just death. Okay, right, shoot him on the spot, and then what happens? What happens to Gordon? It's like, what plan were you hoping for here?
Don't question the Nolan brothers.
I'm just saying, if you think we're going out on that ice willingly, you have another thing coming. Death, then. Looks that way. Bang! End of film. No more. I'd have a lot of respect if that's where they finish it. It would be so good.
It would have given Joseph Gordon-Levitt something to do in the third
It
act.
would have.
I mean...
and that's something as well. It would give him something to do. I like...
Oh, go and get these kids across the bridge. Oh, you didn't get them across the bridge. Oh, the bomb's gone. Alright.
It does begin the train of like,
it's like,
Robin, for Christ's sake.
Even if you do, like, I'm not gonna lie, it's still a good thing, but it's like 12 people.
Batman, look! And it's just like, I don't care. I saved the city.
I saved this bus.
So
dumb. I've only thought of that now, but like, what was the...
I helped some town planners in the future.
What was the point in that?
I don't know. I think it was to leave... Like, do you know what? Family Guy makes a great point, right?
I hate when that happens.
Don't you? There's a moment where Stewie is talking to Batman, and people start... And he reveals something that Batman thought was a secret. And Stewie goes... Batman, you hired a team of builders to build your car a Lazy Susan. People talk about this shit. And it's like, the bit at the end where Joseph Gordon-Levitt just discovers the platform. I'm like, it looks really cool.
It's a great shot.
It's a great shot. And obviously it's continuing the thing of like...
And the way the music swells.
The music swells up as it goes up, and it's intercut with the restaurant. And Fox finding out that it was Bruce Wayne that fixed the autopilot, but like,
also just have the autopilot be fixed.
This is what I mean.
Don't say Bruce Wayne. Yeah,
this
I get you now.
This is now Nolan going,
and that's what you said.
Telling,
just,
not
just
showing.
Keep it on Alfred. Have him put the card away.
Yeah, and then you should use your real name. I like that name, Robin. Oh, we know exactly who he is. We don't need him to go to the cave now, because we know exactly what this is going to do. We've seen him save the bus, and he's clearly very giddy about saving the bus. And now we've seen him go and get his real name back, and it's like, I think Nolan was keen, and understandably so. And listen, I've heard him talk about making Batman films. He's not going back, but like, I think he was keen to make sure he left it in a place where people didn't need to ask for more. People didn't need to go, this needs a resolution, this needs a resolution. And in doing so, I think he abandoned one of the best things about his style, which is his ability to go, I'm going to leave this up to you.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he had to tell people, which I think is sad, and it might not be his fault, but I just think it diminishes some of the parts of the film for me.
I can live with that.
Yeah. As I say,
mean,
none of these films are bad.
It's still only number 9 on mine.
Yeah.
It's not.
None of these films are
None of
bad.
these
These
films are
Tarantino would be a very happy man to have these 12 films on his roster.
Yeah. He's only making 10 films.
He's only making 10 films. Which I Surely he's got more
I
stories
mean,
to tell.
this isn't what this podcast is
No,
about. And
that's
it's
his
sort of
business.
but like whenever he comes out and says anything like that, I'm just sort of like, okay,
Whatever.
whatever it is this time. Like, I don't care.
All right, let's move on to number 8 then.
Number 8.
Because I'm sure we will return to the Batman trilogy, of course.
What's your number 8?
My number 8 is Tenet.
My number 8 is Memento.
Okay.
So let's talk about Tenet.
Fine, let's talk about Tenet. I would love Tenet 10 times more if they'd sort out the bloody audio.
Yeah, it's like any Cocteau Twins song for me, which is like, it's great, it's really great, I love the vibe.
Yeah.
Would love to hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, I just...
It's all, when I saw loads of interviews, Nolan being like, we referenced Oppenheimer in my last film, Tenet, and I'm going, did you? I didn't hear that. And then I went back and was like, yeah, you did. Trinity test, John David Washington.
It's all Bane.
All I have to use a word. It's Tenet. I think there is a lot of very, very clever stuff in Tenet.
Well, it's Christopher Nolan does Bond.
Absolutely. And Michael Caine calls it the biggest action film ever made.
As with a lot of these, I mean, there's a noticeable pattern, which is like Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan does biography. Interstellar, Christopher Nolan does sci-fi.
There was a period of time...
The Batman trilogy, Christopher Nolan does superhero.
Yeah, there was a time when...
Christopher Nolan does war movie.
Yeah, Kubrick had the same reputation. He, 2001, because Kubrick does...
No, he wasn't Apocalypse Now. Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, Kubrick does the definitive sci-fi film. Kubrick does the definitive social drama, Clockwork Orange. Kubrick does, war film. And then it got to The Shining, and it was like, okay, Kubrick makes the definitive horror film. But I don't think The Shining is anywhere near as good as people thought it was going to be, and actually as people think it is, to be honest. That's for a different time. But what I'm trying to say is, Nolan was already one of the action goats.
So I think coming into Tenet, and I think he's regained that sense of momentum since. Yeah. Christopher Nolan was in his prime. So far, anyway. Mm-hmm. I think he's very much regained that momentum with Oppenheimer, but Tenet was kind of it was perceived, especially kind of when it came out, and his insistence on it coming out in theatres. I think there was a lot of backlash, basically, and then it turned out to be not one of his best, but again, it's Nolan, like you say with The Shining, it's like people expected a lot more. Yeah. And they got a lot of Nolan fuckery. And
big time Nolan fuckery.
But I think it either went over people's heads or people got it and didn't like it as much as they thought they would.
It takes 3 watches, this film.
Yes. I still don't have a timeline worked out.
Not completely.
In my head.
The ending to me is still a bit fuzzy.
Like the bit where Neil runs in and gets like shot.
Yeah. I understand that he's sacrificing himself at the end.
But I don't know where he came
quite
from.
Work out when.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's going to die. And that's the thing about Tenet, is I really wish they'd sold me more on Neil and the protagonist. I wish that their friendship was
the crux.
Because that moment, that would have been like a blind, like he knows that he has to go back, and that's the end of it for them.
One thing, and we'll speak about this with Oppenheimer as well,
right,
or I'm sure we will anyway, is Tenet was the first time you worked with him, though, is Ludwig Göransson.
Oh,
the sound in this movie, despite the fact that dialogue doesn't seem to be part of it, and the same thing with Oppenheimer, except you can hear what they're saying. Is the sound is its own character. The score is its own character. Absolutely. The score has this visceral, grating,
pulsating
kind of artificial feel to it, and it's just perfect for the vibe of the film. So the trucks scene, kind of the mobile heist they pull on the highway in, what is it, like Estonia?
Yes,
something like that.
Yeah,
the score in that film, in that scene,
it's amazing.
Incredible.
Is that the scene that posterity plays over?
No. I have no idea what scene posterity plays over.
But that is
the track is called Trucks in Place.
Right. Okay.
So I listened to film soundtracks when I studied.
Social Network. If you ever want to feel like, if you want to concentrate or feel like you're doing something important, put the Social Network on. Just be like, oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm a mad genius.
Yeah, I know. It's flowing out.
As for the story, what happens?
So this is where we come to what I mentioned earlier, which is Clemens Posey's character saying, you don't try to understand it, just try to feel it, right? And I think that's Nolan going for the audiences that are not going to watch it 3 times. If you're not going to clock on exactly what's going on here, just try and take yourself with it. Just try and
I
go
love
with
that
it.
you can clock on with it though, but with Tenet specifically, it feels like there's kind of a gizmo or a trick being pulled on us here when he introduces us to inverted stuff for the first time in the laboratory.
Yeah.
It feels like okay guys, sit down, here's what it is this time, rather than an integral part of the plot, if that makes sense.
Although, you say that, right? I thought that initially Clemence Posey's characters looked really bored with him. And then I was then it was brought to my attention. I was like, what if she's had this conversation with him before? And the reason why she's a bit lethargic with it, and the reason why that scene...
Well, he's had this conversation with her.
With her, definitely.
An older version of him and a younger version of her.
Yeah, have had this conversation. Yeah. That's the thing, and there's so much of it that is very, very clever. Like, the car chase, and then the inverted car chase. That is classic Nolan. That is beautifully made stuff. And the choreographed fight scenes of John David Washington going in reverse.
Everything that happens at the airport is perfect.
Yeah, it's amazing. The 747 crash.
The 747 crash, the getting the stuff out, the turnstile fight scene where it turns out he's fighting himself.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Everything that happens in the airport, 10 out of 10, I love.
Really good.
The final fight scene that takes place in northern Russia at one of those old secret Soviet cities. I think it's just kind of neat that those exist. You ever heard of Chelyabinsk 40?
I have not.
Oh my god, it's fucked, mate. Go down that rabbit hole one day.
Wikipedia.
It feels sort of... There's a lot of issues with the end battle. So, like, when the building gets blown up twice, once in reverse, once... Like, so how is it standing there in the first place?
Exactly.
Is my question.
Yeah.
But I guess if it's hit with an inverted round...
Yeah.
But then where does the round go? Has it been there for the past 5,000 years and then comes out into, like, I don't know.
It's tricky. It takes a lot. You need to invest a lot in Tenet. And I think eventually it will reward you, but here's the thing. Have you ever heard of a Sator Square?
Yes, I have.
Right. So, as you well know, but to anyone who doesn't know, a Sator Square is basically like an ancient Latin equivalent of a meme, in that people used to post it everywhere, like on walls physically.
Yes.
It was like graffiti.
So, you know when you do that S in your school jotter or something? Yeah. This is the Roman equivalent of that.
Absolutely. And it's a square that has, at the top it has Sator, Opera, Tenet, Rotas, and then Arepo.
No, it goes...
Arepo, Rotas.
Arepo, Rotas.
Right. And...
all of those are in the film.
All of those are in the film. So Sator... It's
called Tenet.
It's called Tenet. Sator is Ken Branagh.
Brilliant. It opens with an opera.
It opens at the opera. Arepo is...
the
painter. And then Rotas is...
No idea.
Something else. But they're all in the film, right? The film is full of things that make you go, clever. But they don't add anything.
Yeah.
Like, John David Washington is doing...
The fundamental concept of film is inverted, reverse causality. Great concept. I love the fact that he felt brave enough
to go, you can reverse the entropy. Yeah, let's do that.
Imagine pitching that to Warner Brothers executives. Yeah, Warner Brothers sucks, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know.
Fuck Warner Brothers.
Oh my god, they delayed Dune by like 5 months.
Did they?
Yeah, it's coming.
It's been ready for ages.
It's coming out at the start of 2024 now.
Is it? I thought it was like
it was meant to be
November.
Yeah, we're Warner Brothers. Fuck you. If there's one thing Warner Brothers can't do, it's like not kill a franchise. Like structuring a film around inverted causality. Bold. But the way that it's presented in the film and the way that the story then goes through it doesn't feel like it doesn't because in the film, in the runtime, it feels like a gizmo, a gimmick, a little I'm doing this thing this time.
Yeah.
And then obviously once you think about the film more, like I would love to have it really be bold and have things happen in Act 1 that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
That leave you reeling for the rest of the film.
Sure.
And then Act 3, we're going to go do this now. And then something happens. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which happens a bit. And then obviously there's the end of the film where it's revealed that the protagonist, John David Washington,
sets up Tenet.
Sets up the whole film.
Yeah.
And that not only was the final battle scene a pincer movement from the past and the future, the whole film was that he set in motion. I would almost prefer if we saw that movie.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. And the reason I know what you mean is because I have done it where I've watched the end and then gone, right, I'm going to watch the opera scene again. And it makes It's so much better. It is so much better the second time round. All the things you pick up on going, right, that makes 10 times more sense. Clearly, Nolan has gone, I'm going to make a film that everyone's going to rewatch. Well, not everyone, but people who rewatch it will find everything that they missed the first time round, and it might click. It hasn't clicked, but I get more of it now. But the problem is that so much of it is just like, oh, yeah, cool, and not add anything to it. Like, John David Washington is constantly doing pull-ups, and pull-up is an anagram, but the action of doing a pull-up looks the same forward as it does backwards. Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Neat.
But it's not doing anything. It's not
just
adding
neat.
anything on. It's just cool. I like that Robert Pattinson's bringing back the word golly. That's great. He's frightfully British. And Kieran Brand is very, very bad man. And you know he is evil because he talks like a very, very evil man from Russia. Elizabeth Debicki, doesn't she fucking love her kid? Oh, she loves her child.
Oh, well, she's a woman, Dom.
Oh, well.
What do they do?
What do they do?
Oh,
Children, yes.
They love their kids.
There was a bit, wasn't there, where they go up to the... They go up to the balcony, Neil and the protagonist, and they're like, we're here to see the dealer, or whatever. And then Dimple Kapadia is at I think her name's Priya in the film, and she's standing at the door, and she's like, well, it's actually me, and I'm a woman.
And she's doing the hand thing.
Yeah, I'm a woman. And
Yeah.
I'd kind of be like, right, okay, bit weird. You could have just had this conversation. We didn't need to go, well, and then have them sit over a dinner. And the dinner is the point in the film the most where I went, what are you saying? Talk louder, for God's sake. I can't hear a word of this. It's like...
No, that's the most annoying thing, though, is it's really loud.
It's
what
so...
we're saying.
Yeah,
It's so
but
loud,
it's
but it's
somewhere...
so muffled.
somewhere in a studio, Ludwig is dancing around going...
Well, is he responsible for sound mixing?
No, he's not
as well?
responsible for sound mixing, but
Who the
like...
hell is?
I don't know, some idiot. But we'll get onto this later with Oppenheimer. This is one of the big things. You're right, the sound is a character. There's a lot of stuff in... I think Tenet is really clever, and I like lots of it. But I think it's too incoherent in places. I think the sound mixing issue is a really basic error for a film as big as this, and I refuse to believe that it wasn't tested on multiple, people
Test
to work
audiences.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
You're right. It's such a silly error.
Yeah.
For
It's
something this professional.
You'd think that would be like a key thing and it's a wordy film. If you miss one line of dialogue, you might not know what's going on for the next 10 minutes. It is the last film with Michael Caine and Christopher Nolan, and I like that the last thing that is said to him is goodbye, Sir Michael. There's a bit of like a recognition that like their partnership is coming to an end, but thank you for all that. Like I like that a lot. There's stuff in it that is great, but there is too much in it that feels like it's just on show, and it's for my money the most Nolan-y Nolan to ever Nolan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean anything, but it says so much.
I think there's just a lot in it that's like Chris,
we're all friends here.
yeah, come on. Let's just, be nicer for my poor mother who was sat there. I got Tenet on DVD for my birthday and we watched it, and Mum was just like, I'm so sorry, I've got absolutely no idea what's going on. And normally I'm like, okay, let me explain this to you. But this time I was just like,
Neither?
yeah, no, I don't know what's happening. I can't tell what's going on. And yet, what does it say about it that it's still relatively high up on the list?
It's just so well made.
It's just really, really well made.
Really well
There
made.
is so much in it that's fantastic. But
John David Washington is
he's
excellent.
amazing.
The physicality he brings
So
to that
good.
role. Every fight scene is splendid. And the fact that he had to learn how to throw a punch
in reverse. Yeah.
is so cool
It's
to me.
really impressive. But I will say this. At the end of that car chase, when the car has crashed, and then
So the car's not inverted.
the
but
car
he is.
isn't inverted, but he is, right? And then it cuts to black, and then they wake up in an ambulance, and Neil goes, heat is also inverted, so that was actually cold, what was happening there, and
That's said at the start of the film.
Yeah, but who the fuck heard it? So we're then woken up in an ambulance, and it's re-explained to us, and I'm like, it may have been alluded to at the beginning, but like, we were not equipped going into that for that to be the outcome, because the protagonist doesn't know. He's like, what has just happened to me? And I think there's stuff like that. I'm like, that's bad. That's bad writing, Chris. You can do better than cut to black and go, oh, I've woken up in
lot
an ambulance.
Yeah, there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's a few moments like that in Tenet where I wouldn't get what was going on, and I just had such faith
Yeah,
that it would be a brilliant masterpiece mindfuck that I could just like, oh, but I assume when I get it,
Yeah.
this is gonna be great.
Exactly.
And then you never get it,
He's like, oh.
and it's just like, oh,
Maybe it's not great. Listen, it's got an
It's
enormous
good.
scale. It is good. The international, all over the world of it. It was not helped by the fact that it was basically seen as the film to reopen cinemas, which it didn't ask for.
it didn't ask for it, didn't need to have that
No.
weight put on it.
And that may well be why it got some of the reception it did, is because people were going, this is a lot to come. This is to come back to for this. Like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
But as I say, there's still so much in it that is good, so it deserves to be, I think, where it is. Let's crack on. What is your number 7?
It's Batman Begins.
My number 7 is Batman Begins.
Brilliant.
Excellent. I'll let you kick this off.
Well, I gotta scroll. You go.
Okay. I absolutely adore... Oh, shite. There go the notes.
Broken Stalin's house.
A broken Stalin's house. Going to the gulag. I absolutely adore Batman Begins. I think it's
really
one
like
of the
Batman
best
Begins.
art house films that I've ever seen, ever. I think it was ridiculously stupid of him to try and take on Batman at the time that he did. But I've got a lot of respect for
so
what he
proud
did.
of him,
It's
though.
so good. It's brilliant.
What
and
was the Batman film before Batman Begins? Was it that Tim Burton one?
it was, I can't remember if it was either Tim Burton or was it Batman and Robin, the George Clooney one.
What, with the nipples?
Yeah.
Oh, might have been Batman and Robin.
Well, maybe it was. I can't remember. Either way, we needed good Batman back. And the idea that Nolan went, who's my antagonist? Which version of the story do I tell of it? Oh, I know. We'll get like 5 of them. And just flocked everyone in and then gave everyone their own individual... Now, bias, but my favourite villain in it is Scarecrow. Because I think... Number one, he was taking a chance on Cillian Murphy because he hasn't done a role like that before in terms of that. Even like Disco Pigs, you could argue, is a bit like sort of just like going wild.
So
but-
Cillian Murphy, I mean, I'm sure you know, had a screen test.
Yeah, as
for
Batman.
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. And then they were like...
Which
well,
I don't think he
not
had the
anymore.
kind of the presence in the same way that Christian Bale could.
I think his Batman was pretty good, but his Bruce Wayne was not what Christian Bale had it as. Christian Bale has Bruce Wayne the same way he has... what's his name from American Psycho? Bateman?
Patrick Bateman.
Patrick Bateman.
Patrick Bateman.
They're very similar in that sort of that sort of like that sort of almost dancey, cocky suaveness.
I do think like I think there have been better Batmans
Yeah.
than Christian Bale's.
Yeah.
Like Robert Pattinson's
Robert
up there.
Pattinson. Oh, that's-
And
Don't say Val Kilmer, I'll punch you
I
in the
wasn't going
face.
to say Val Kilmer.
Good.
Michael
Keaton.
Michael
Yeah.
Keaton. I think he was a better Batman.
Yeah.
I think that Christian Bale is the best Bruce Wayne.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
I love the Pattinson voice for Batman.
Yeah.
Which is it's so obviously you get Christian Bale, which is the city
Yeah.
just show you that it's full of people ready, and it's like
He
get
just
to the point.
smokes 20 before
Yeah,
he
exactly.
goes out as
Whereas
Batman.
Pattinson, there's there's a line of like
We talked about
the Batman,
the Pattinson.
very briefly, and we did a massive diversion in the Bond episode. where
So
we're like,
we
let's
did,
just talk about
yeah.
not Bond for half an hour.
So we did,
Um,
yeah. Do you know what my favourite moment, my favourite
Go
thing
on.
about the Batman, so we're going to have another tangent
Do
here,
it.
is how much he sucks at being Batman. So like he's running away from all the cops in the police headquarters,
Yeah.
like Robert Pattinson's one, and he gets the zip line up to the top of the roof and puts his wingsuit on,
Oh, yeah.
and then just fucks it
Oh yeah.
all the way down. And you're just like, you're really bad at being Batman. This is great.
His voice is so much better. It's like
Yeah.
the who's the mustache with the broken nose. It's so much like because obviously he's trying to he's putting on a
You
different
still
identity.
sound cool,
Exactly.
but like it's not.
Every word you're about to find out. Look, Batman Begins is the perfect creation myth film. I adore how long it is before he is Batman. I think it's so... And it could have lost so many people to go, let's not have him be Batman for ages. Yes, Michael, you've got your hand up.
Do you know what the best part of this film is for me?
Go on.
Hans Zimmer. It's the first Nolan film with Hans Zimmer. So when I think of Batman, when you think of Batman Begins, tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay, go on.
You think of the big sweeping shots of Himalayan mountains and glaciers, and you think of that one long chord that Hans Zimmer makes his strings hold every time there's a big shot like that.
Yeah.
That's Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy for me. Is I think of it, like the first thing that pops into my head is Hans Zimmer's music before I think of any of the shots. Before I think of any of the cool stuff,
We're
I
absolutely
think
coming
of the
back
music.
to this topic, by the way. So, but carry on.
But yeah, how long the film is before he becomes.
Yes, yeah. I think it's brave because so many people could have wandered into that and gone like, he isn't Batman. This isn't I wanted Batman. Where is he? Which is why I respect the Batman for going. Let's skip. We've seen this a million times. He's Batman already. Let's just go from there. His parents are dead. Everyone knows his parents are dead.
Everyone knows.
We know this. So let's join him from there. Whereas this, obviously, it takes its time massively.
Robert Pattinson's Batman is the perfect evolution of the Batman IP.
Yes.
Because you can have different Bruce Waynes, but it's always just Batman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the perfect evolution of the Batman IP post Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan defined this era. Like Christian Bale's always going to be Bruce Wayne for me. And people who were like 14 seeing the Batman in cinemas, Robert Pattinson's going to be Batman for them. I'm cool with that. So like,
just don't watch The Flash first. Just don't watch The Flash because then it's Michael Keaton.
Oh, that was on the list. Damn. One of the 4 people to see The Flash.
Everyone was like, Blue Beetle opened. I was like,
what?
Cool.
Oh, I saw that on a bus the other day.
I was like, I watched the trailer and I was like,
like
I went, it says something like, my strength is my family. And I was like, oh, it's Fast and Furious. Are we going to have Vin Diesel?
Bug.
But it's a bug. Fast and Furious bug.
I like.
You know what this bug's about?
We're in the worst part of it in this superhero movie way of the Western cycle. Because everyone knew the minute Endgame came out, it was like, right, okay, we're kind of done here.
Bye.
But Kevin Feige is just not gonna let
I want to do some more. I like my money the way
I don't think you understand how scary that man is. He'll like end your career if you spoil something.
This franchise just showed you. Yeah, Batman Begins. I think the effects in Batman Begins are great. I think the script is brilliantly written. I think it's comic booky enough to be comic booky, but it's not the comic booky where you go, this is ridiculous.
It's so even when it's comic booky, it's still got Christopher Nolan's style of simple shots, simple movements, one thing at a time on screen. Because that's what it is in most Nolan. There's one thing on the screen at a time. Yeah. Right, which I like. It makes it very, considering the matter of most of his films, make things easy to follow. The realistic take on Batman, stroke of genius, brilliant. Fits incredibly well with that style that Nolan does. The last half of the film, I think, in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, stylistically, he had found his feet with the character a lot more.
Sure.
Than what he was willing to do. So like when you think of Batman movies, you think of goofy, big costumes, all of that stuff. And there's a bit of that in the end of Batman Begins, and that's where Nolan's realistic style doesn't really fit as well.
Sure, yeah.
So it's like, oh, we're on this big monorail with a big water vaporizer machine. It's like a Doofenshmirtz thing.
Yeah.
And then he realizes once Batman Begins out, and it's great, everyone loves it. He knows what works and what doesn't, and he applies his own style much more rigorously in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, which does him well. Yeah,
big MacGuffin in this film. The bomb being the big MacGuffin is like. I love the fact that Nolan did that and went, well, this suddenly works well. I think we'll do this again later on.
It's also the machine they use in Batman Begins to destroy the city was made by Thomas Wayne.
Right, sure.
Which I think is just kind of like, you could add a bunch of themes to that if you want.
Yeah.
I doesn't think it does more than just being quite neat. But
no,
especially because Bruce Wayne's, you know what, screw it, let's apply the themes. Bruce Wayne's parents represent that feeling of safety and order to the world and kind of an objective morality that he's been trying to get back to ever since his fall from, so everyone has that moment where the world doesn't make sense anymore when you're like 7. It's like the first time like a wasp stings you or something, and you're like, I am not in Eden. What the hell is going on?
Do you know the first time I had a wasp sting me, I thought it was going to be on the news. I didn't understand.
Well, there you
didn't
go.
understand how the news worked.
Or the first time you're in a barn and it's big and dark, and you get scared of the big and the dark. You know, to abuse a Seamus poem.
This isn't nice actually. This
yeah. It's the first time you realize you're not in a big playground. It's like a fall from Eden.
Yeah,
that's what happens to Bruce Wayne. A, when he falls down the well.
Yes.
And B, you know, falls down a well, your parents get killed. You know, choose which one of those is the more significant
things.
For
it's the vulnerable Batman. That's what I like about this film. It's like, and it shows as well. This is what I'm talking about earlier when I was talking about the Dark Knight and the actual like physical conflict scenes. Is the thing that Scarecrow does, right, is he turns everyone into drugged, insane people. So Falcone goes, and then he tries it on Batman, and it works, and it actually gets to him, and we think of Batman as, you know, as the Dark Knight.
He's a monolith.
Is invincible, and he acts in the dark, he works in the dark, he is a lot of people's worst fear.
Turn fear on the fearful, yada yada yada.
Exactly. But he is susceptible, even though it's a drug, he is susceptible to the work of Scarecrow. And that's when...
He's vulnerable.
Yeah. And I like the fact that this isn't The Amazing Spider-Man, where he gets bitten, and after a certain amount of faffing around in his bathroom, he's like, I'm fucking mint at this. Yeah. It's like, I've got somewhere to go.
Again,
like, I need to do
Batman
this.
Begins.
Exactly.
He's like not, again, it's like what I love about Robert Pattinson's one. It's like, he's not very good at this yet. Like, it's like...
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he's all right.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I love about this film. I think it looks so good.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have that much more to say about it, but yeah, I think we probably should crack on, because we'll have a lot. I've got a lot to say, certainly, about something coming up. So you say your number 8 was Memento.
My number 8 was Memento.
Okay.
Yes.
My number 6 is Memento.
Let's bloody do Memento then.
What is your number 6?
My number 6 is Dunkirk.
Okay, we'll do Memento. I thought Memento's genius was purely in its story, and its story is genius. The structure of
The horseshoe.
Watching Nolan explain that and understanding it was.
I'm gonna be honest.
So
I didn't
clever.
get the film until I watched that video.
Okay.
Because I only watched it once,
Right.
and I was like, "What the hell?"
Okay.
And then I was like, "Well, I could watch it again to get it."
Sure.
But then I'd have to watch it before I do the thing with Dom. In which case, I'll have to watch this film twice, and it's just like a month. So I'm just gonna watch Memento explain with a bunch of arrows and circles. Like,
I think it's so clever the way the story sets out. To do that on film number 2, to go, here's a scenario where I am going to try and make the most batshit film ever, and it's only my second film. And I'm going to bend it in so many ways.
It's the first time he's got any sort of budget to work with. So he's like, I'm going to talk about everything I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it here.
Exactly. And I forgot, in thinking about how good the story is actually how visual it is. It looks brilliant. Like the visual cues to go from colour to black and white, to switch from what is the truth to what is going backwards and reverse in perception, is really, really clever.
What I think the actual crux of the narrative is, in terms of the message for people watching the film, is the whole, throughout the film, is Lenny.
Yeah.
I want to say Lenny. What's
Lenny!
the actor's name?
Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce. I've seen him in everything. I just don't know what he's bloody called. So Guy Pearce, Lenny, he's I don't know what the condition is, because he can remember his life up to a traumatic
some sort of
event,
retrograde amnesia, something.
And then every day past that event, he can't remember everything from when he wakes up. So he can form memories for the day, and then he goes to sleep, and he's back to square one.
Yeah.
And he has this whole system of pictures and tattoos and notes to kind of tell the story of what he's doing. And he's trying to track down his wife's killer. And throughout the film, there are kind of like, Nolan kind of slowly reveals how divorced Lenny's system is from objective reality. Yeah. He kind of reveals how much he's lied to himself and how unreliable his system actually is, and the danger of him finding it completely reliable. So there's that scene where I can't remember what the character's name is, but like, how can you entrust a man's life to this? Your notes could be unreliable. Yeah. And he's like, and Lenny says, so are memories. Is the point he makes anyway. I'm not sure what he actually goddamn says.
But that's the point.
Lenny is an extreme externalized example of how distorted all of our subjective experiences are from reality, and how distorted our self-perception and how distorted our recollection of our memories inwardly is from objective reality. We just notice it with Lenny because he has the tattoos.
Yeah.
So if you think about a memory that happened 3-4 years ago, maybe you had an argument with someone or you went through a breakup or something like that, and you think that you're the good guy in that scenario, that's because, like, how do you know that? How do you remember? Because you can't remember the whole conversation. You can't remember every conversation. So you don't know how you've come across. You don't know what you're talking about, basically. This is just one example. Lenny's an externalized version of that because he physically has no memories. It's all his memory. The same way you'll go into your brain to remember something, he goes out of the room and into his study. And it's like he's standing in his memory. The point that the film is making is that his system of keeping track with time is equally as unreliable as ours, even though we technically have functioning memories.
Sure.
Which I thought was cool.
I was going to say about Memento is the first time we did the Nolan episode is I asked you very briefly at the start what your least favourite one was, and you said Memento, and I was way too kind. But now hearing that you didn't get it until you were like, oh, and then watch the thing.
Yeah.
Way,
so
way
I watched
more
it at the start of this summer, and that was the second time I'd ever seen it, and I still didn't get it.
Right.
Because I'm stupid and I suck. And then I watched the explanation video, and I was like, I'll tell you what, this is good.
Yeah, I like it. As well, I will say this about Memento.
And it's gone from 11 because Oppenheimer wasn't out to 8.
Yes.
So,
well, there you go. I think.
And it's only his second film, and his first one with a budget.
Well, exactly.
So,
first time with a budget, and there is a structural thing with Memento, but there is also a thing with Memento that happens on a emotional level. It has an emotional clout that is really quite impactful, and I think it marries brilliantly with The Prestige, because by the end of it you see him reject the option to go, I have fixed this. He's fixed it a million times before, but now you realise at the end that every time he fixes it, it gets started again.
Yeah. The fact that it ends in the middle.
It ends in the middle. This the thing is, there's the point, there's the cut off, there's the incident, and then it curves back round again.
Yeah.
And I love that is there, but I also think it marries brilliantly with that bit in The Prestige when Hugh Jackman says, I don't care about my wife anymore, I care about his secret. And it's like they've gone beyond the point of what the actual idea of their intention was, and they are doing it for the sake of doing it.
They've crossed an altogether different Rubicon.
Exactly.
And they're now just lost.
Yeah, and I love the fact that is film number 2, and he's just gone.
Imagine being an established director. When did Memento come out? 2000.
2000.
Just 2000.
It's either 2000 or 2002.
Well, who was a big name in 2000?
Spielberg.
Imagine being Spielberg.
Yeah.
And this comes out, and it's his second film, and his first time working with a studio.
Excuse
me? And you're
me?
like, huh? Am I gonna have to compete with this guy in like box office summer? Like,
yeah.
Summer blockbusters.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, you will, Spielberg, and you'll lose.
2 other things I wanted to say about Memento were, I think it's quite funny. The bit where he opens the cupboard door and there's just a bloke there with gaffer tape over his mouth, and he's just like, what? And then what's his name? Teddy comes in and he's like, who the hell's this guy? And he's like, I don't know, do you do it? Well, it was clearly you. But this is like the prime example of the film that I was watching with my mum, and we got 20 minutes in and she went, I'm so sorry, I've got absolutely no idea what's going on. And I sat down and I drew her the diagram of how it works. And like how so we're in colour here, and then we go to black and white, and then we'll go back to colour. But the colour bit starts where the colour bit ends where the last scene started. So it's catching up with you the whole time. She couldn't get her head around it, and then she gave up. So I watched this initially with 3 people. Were 3 months ago when I was last watching it, and then it finished with just me. So I think
it is a bit difficult.
It is a bit, but I think.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't grasp
if it clicks, I think it's worth it.
If and when it clicks.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Let's move on to number 5. So what do you have at number 5?
You first,
me first. Okay. At number 5...
If you stand.
The Dark Knight.
My number 5 is The Dark Knight.
Is it?
Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, let's talk about The Dark Knight.
Now, we did cover this one last time.
We did, so
we don't have to spend
we don't
as much
spend
time
ages on it. No,
It's perfect.
It is perfect.
It's amazing.
Absolutely
It's the best.
amazing.
It's the best.
It was on again there because it was 15 years old.
Mm.
They re-released it in cinemas, and I went to go and see it on the big screen again. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is so good!" Everything about it, from the way one of my favorite things about it is the way that they build up Harvey Dent so well that the Two-Face character, which can sometimes be a bit too on the nose for me, I didn't care because I thought Harvey Dent has been built up so well that this makes total sense to me why he would be like this.
And the scene in the restaurant where they talk about, is this Gotham's White Knight?
Yeah.
Or is this Gotham's Dark Knight?
Yeah.
And he talks about, what the Romans would do is they would just suspend democracy and have a dictator, and Rachel, who is the perpetual moral compass of these films, is like, well, the last guy who did that was named Caesar, and then get up and all of that. And it's set up so well. Do you know what else is really neat about this film? This is the first time Nolan gets his hands on something that will define his films for the rest of his films, as long as he's making them. This is the first time he gets his hands on an IMAX camera.
Yeah.
And it's a bit janky, the way that he kind of does it. There's no method to the madness. It's just sort of because the cameras are so big and bulky and loud. He uses IMAX wherever he can and switches back to 35mm wherever he can. So you kind of switch between having bars at the bottom of the screen and not having bars at the bottom of the screen, which is a little weird. But like, if you don't like, I've never noticed it. I just had it pointed out, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess you do. But like, I don't really care. It's just so good. The opening sequence is perfect.
Here's Gotham. Here's what Gotham is like tonight, and there's this shit going on.
Yeah.
And then it's like betrayal. Only the Joker left.
And do you know the first, because that film, it's all panning shots or action shots. The opening sequence anyway. And then the first time you get a close up on a character, it's when he takes the mask off and it's Heath Ledger, and it's like, wow, okay, this has been built up without. I mean, we knew it was him because of the clown masks and the calling card at the end of the last film. Yeah, we knew it was him, and yet still, I was like, oh damn, it's the Joker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is because there's so many people with the Joker masks on, I think it's that whole idea of just at the start, the first time you're watching it, you actually don't know where to look. You don't know which one is going to be the one. And then it's like, oh, it's that the one. And what I love about that opening scene as well is the bank manager makes a perfectly salient point. He's like, you're not the first guy. You won't be the last guys to do this.
Yeah.
Like, this city is like this. Like, this will keep happening, Someone will get you.
What are you different? How are you different?
Exactly.
And he goes
and
off
then
and
he gets a grenade put in his mouth. Now, I do watch that, and when he's got his hands tied behind his back and he gets a grenade put in his mouth, just spit out the grenade. But the rest of it all plays out like that.
Too.
No. Joker takes the pin with him, does he not?
Yeah.
Because it's attached to the bus.
It's the smoke.
Yeah. I think the thing the thing I always think about The Dark Knight, and I was gonna talk about it with Oppenheimer as well because I think it does it, but this is where it does it the most, or then the best, right? Is the music is done in such a way that each bit of music transitions over from one scene to another completely seamlessly, so the whole thing plays out like one sequence of events. The entire film is just like, we're going. And even the scenes where it's just people talking, Gordon going into Harvey Dent's office, and then the first time they mention the idea about, like, they call you Two-Face, I wouldn't know anything about that. And the music just carries on into the thing. It's like, you feel like you're watching this entirely singular item play out in so many different places, but it all feels connected. Because you are. It's thematically absolutely perfect. It's Jungian, it's bright and clever, it's got some of the best physical effects, the truck flip, watching that with like a surround sound system and a massive screen, I was like, yes!
And that's a big like American 18-wheeler.
Yeah, it's huge.
Feel it in the cinema.
It's so good. I don't have much negative to say about it. In fact, I don't know if I have anything to say about it. I could probably talk about it for the length of the film, if not more.
Yeah. There's a lot in there.
The ideas of, Batman is what he's striving to be. The Joker is what he's trying to prevent himself from being. All that stuff about the Joker not wanting to kill Batman because, what would I do without you?
They say it in the film, and yet it doesn't take away from the film.
Yeah.
It's show, don't tell. They tell. And it doesn't take away from the show. He outright says, this is a battle for the soul of Gotham.
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just the rest of the film.
Do you know what I noticed the second, not
so
the second
well
time,
done.
but like the fifth time watching it around, whatever it was, and I saw it in the cinema. Everyone is in this film. This is the first time that Nolan goes, I'm going to have like 400 people in this cast. And I noticed it because Charles Venn, who was in Casualty, just plays
you were in Casualty.
You were in Casualty, your man from Casualty. He's just one of the henchmen.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. And then I watched it this time. I was like, oh, that's him. And I kept doing it. I kept going, oh, that's him from that. And all of this stuff. I love that they reincorporate the redesign of the bat suit into it. Oh, you want to be able to turn your head? Like, because people knew that was a thing that was an issue from beforehand.
Yeah.
Everything about it is just genius. And I think the fact that it lasts as long as it does, the fact that it stands the test of time to now, that no superhero film has ever beaten it, that is the standard. That is the gold standard of comic book movies.
It's the best superhero film ever made.
Without a shadow of a doubt. There will never be anything that is as good as it at all. The dialogue...
There's a lot... There's like 3 other films on this list that I'm going to say is perfect.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say they're perfect with the caveat of they're perfect to me.
Yeah, right.
This is the only Nolan film that I think is perfect.
Objectively, nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously, one of the best performances ever with Heath Ledger. So much of it is so great.
Which is another example of that. Like, who the hell else would cast
exactly.
Heath Ledger as this like, I can see a lot of other Batman directors casting him as a goofier version of the Joker. Who was going to cast Heath Ledger as this Joker?
Yeah.
And he stole the film.
Yeah. And like after that truck flip, when he's standing and Batman's driving towards him on the bike and he's just going like, hit me, come on, hit me. All that kind of like, it's so creepy. And the bit where Gordon gets announced as the new commissioner and everyone's clapping and then cuts to Joker and he's clapping.
And that's
it's improvised.
Yeah.
Like,
you know how he licks his lips all the time. It's really unsettling and it's really weird. And it's just sort of like, ugh, and he's getting all up in someone's faces, going like licking his lips. That's just because the makeup
really
wouldn't stick.
Really,
yeah. The scar makeup wouldn't stick.
I didn't know that.
So he had to keep licking his lips to put it back into place.
That's great.
And it just became part of the character.
That's great.
Yeah.
There's so much of it that is just like, I don't know how you did this.
And
I don't know how you managed to do it.
it doesn't matter who the Joker is.
No.
Nobody gives a shit.
No.
They barely even ask in the film. They're like, the mayor's like, who is this guy? And it's like, oh, he had knives and lint in his pockets. Like, that's all I know about him. No prints, no nothing.
Well, there's that famous line from The Killing Joke where he's like, if I'm going to have a past, I'd prefer it to be multiple choice. And he absolutely plays on that. Like, he deliberately tells people's, like, conflicting backstories about where he came from.
It's brilliant.
It's so good.
I think thematically, I could ramble for hours, but I said most of what I wanted to say last time.
Yeah.
So,
as I say, the Jungian nature of it is the bit that stands out for me. Alfred, great. Fox, great. Every character in this is just flashed out enough for me to go, I'm on board with this. I'm not getting off. The only moment where I go, I'm not sure about this, is the ferry scene where they have to vote on which one's going to get blown up.
Right.
That's the bit, and it's another argument when people go, it's taking itself too seriously. It's not comic booky. 1, fuck off. 2,
comic books take themselves too
exactly.
seriously.
Well, that again, in the Dark Knight, they're gonna be like, we're gonna have a robbery where Scarecrow turns up and there's loads of other Batmen and they're all standing around and then they're gonna steal a truck. Like, that is as comic booky as it gets.
Yeah.
And it's also very comic booky to go, ooh, which ferry's gonna blow up? Joker's posing them a moral question, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's what the Joker does. So,
which is a great way to like up the stakes.
Yeah.
In terms of Joker's
absolutely.
Joker's asking the same question he's been asking the whole film, but you need an ending, raise of stakes.
Yeah.
Pretty good vehicle to put
great way to do it. And I love that the Joker doesn't die. He is just left there hanging to do, to have happen
when
what
he laughs
Batman
maniacally
pleases.
on the way down. That's because he thinks he's got everything.
Yeah.
Because he thinks, I've made Batman kill.
Yeah.
I'm done here. And then he gets saved and he's like, you need an ace in the hole.
Yeah.
Mine's Harvey. And the Joker wins.
Yeah.
He does win. Because
pretty much.
To defeat him temporarily, they have to establish this lie that Harvey Dent is this White Knight and the Batman was a villain all along. And it's that lie that then gets blown up by Bane in the third film and leads to a final truthful reconciliation of the South. of Bruce Wayne's self, with Gotham serving as an externalized mirror of his own psyche. That's the role of Gotham in these films. Other than just being like totally not New York, guys, I promise.
I mentioned it in the other Nolan episode, but I have to say it again. The interrogation scene is one of the cleverest bits of filmmaking I've seen in a long time. I try to use it in my film, albeit in a much crapper way. But when you have a two shot of people, you keep the camera on the same line, you just turn it from one side to the other because you stay on 180 degrees. But then what they do is they then have the line move to the other side of the table, and so that they then flip around like that, so it's discombobulating you, and then Batman and Joker are on the same side of the screen.
Yeah.
And it's the line, they do it at the line when he says, "You're a freak like me, just accept it." And that's when they're on the same section of the screen. And it's just stuff like that. I'm like,
little things like that.
You really
that
know
are
what
a
you're
bitch
doing.
to do.
Yeah.
In the space of a day when you're shooting on set. But just that little extra... Okay, they know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
These guys really know what they're doing.
Absolutely. I think the moment where I was like, oh, his Bruce Wayne is brilliant, is when he crashes the Lamborghini into the truck to stop it getting hit. And then they go to him and he's like, he does the whole act.
It's like, oh, that was a brave thing you did.
He's like, what? What are you talking about?
And then he obviously nods at Coleman Reese, the rat.
Yeah. Shall I fetch the Lamborghini, sir?
Much more subtle.
Much more subtle.
Mr. Way.
I'm trying to serve you fucking breakfast.
I think
You're not even in bed.
It became 5 a day.
It became a thing in our flat to just say everything like Bruce Wayne. Like, is it the Cheerios for you this morning then, Master Wayne?
Master Wayne.
Master Wayne, I'm going to the fucking pub.
Without stepping on the toes of anything we said last time.
Yeah.
I think that's everything I want to say about it.
Okay, I think I'm the same.
I love it. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. What is your number 4?
Well, you're going to hate me.
Oh.
Because my top...
Oh, so I know. I think I know what you've...
You know what I've done.
I think I know
it's what I did last time.
Yeah.
So I'll just spoil it. Number 1's Interstellar.
Yes.
Because I love it.
Sure.
Numbers 2 to 4 are interchangeable.
In order.
But not number 3. So number 2 and 4, I could swap about.
Okay, interesting.
Depending on my mood.
Right. So what's your number 4?
The one I've got written down is Inception.
Wow. That's interesting. Okay. All right.
But it could be number 2.
Okay, cool. I've gone for Dunkirk.
Well, let's talk about Dunkirk.
Let's talk about Dunkirk. I want you to talk about Dunkirk because I've basically said everything I want to about Dunkirk in the other episode.
I mean, it's not going to be much different.
No.
Just sort of it feels like he's showing off. Do you not think?
Yeah.
It's just Nolan going like, I'm gonna make a war film, but I don't want to do Saving Private Ryan. Or like Fury or whatever. Like I don't want to do that. So here's just me showing off how good I am at making films and how empathetic I can make for something that's perceived as a massive defeat.
Yeah.
Also, I'm gonna fuck around with timelines, but it's not even gonna be confusing. Like
people who don't know. They don't even know sometimes.
They need to watch the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like...
But like people who've been to see it are like, there were different timelines playing out. And then some people are like, oh yeah, I love the different timelines playing out. And it doesn't matter. You can read it as the timelines because they all converge on the same spot. So it's the perfect way of doing it.
And he tells you at the start of the film, like, so one time it's like, we're a month away.
Yeah.
From something.
But
we're a week away.
From something.
We're a day away. From something. I don't have much to say, but that's a very good thing.
I have 2 things that I will add on from what I said before. Number 1, I think the naming of the characters, the fact that Cillian Murphy, for example, is just called Shivering Soldier, stuff like that reduces the people down to ideas, is exactly what the film is all about, and exactly what war is all about. I love that. I think it's a great detail. And number 2 is I think it has the greatest shot in war movie history, which is when he's lying on the beach and they see the planes coming over, and he lies down and puts his hands over his head.
The Stuka
and
comes down,
the line of
the
explosions,
kind of the shriek of the Stuka plane, which is so iconic. From just the war.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
and the line
when people, especially in the UK, because Dunkirk evacuations and the Battle of Britain are a massive part of our modern national character. Yeah. The same way that like the battles at Verdun in World War One, like where the French held back the full might of the imperial, not the Nazi, German war machine, which was more so than the Nazis, I'd say, the most powerful military of its day. The same way that Verdun is so important to the French national identity, or the way that the D-Day landings and the Iwo Jima landings and mounting the flag over Iwo Jima is so important to the American national identity. So when British people think about World War II, we think of battles in the air and battles at sea, not so much triumphant, smashing through enemy lines.
Sure.
When Russians think about the war, because of the difference between the theatres, it's horror.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Eastern Front and Western Front are incomparable.
Right.
Like, in terms of the
nature of kind of what
just
the
kind
fighting.
of the way that men became beasts.
Right. Okay.
Like, the war on the Western Front was a lot like World War One. In terms of, we'll do unspeakable things to each other, but if you get captured, it's a gentleman's war.
Okay.
War in the East was a war of extermination. War with the Japanese was a war of extermination.
Yeah, sure.
So when British people think of the war, we think of battles in the air and battles at sea, and we think of that sort of triumph, and we think of sort of a plucky, despite being the largest empire to ever exist, a plucky little island, kind of holding its own against a much bigger behemoth.
Yeah.
And I think Dunkirk. So that's why the Stuka and the kind of the Stuka, by the way, is just the dive bomber that the Germans used, and they had these whistles on the tips of the wing, which is what gives you that kind of as it comes down. That was a horrible rendition, but that's the noise it makes. So you get the noise of that, and suddenly
It's 50 years ago. That could have been your
everyone
whole
in the
act.
audience who knows that sound or has watched a World War II documentary or knows anything about it is going, "Oh no, oh no!
Here comes
fire
alarm
and
bells
death
going.
and destruction."
Yeah.
Because
like-
it's even if you don't know that stuff, it's kind of like wedged. This is why we love Churchill so much, which debate that all day.
But that's the thing is he changed the paint on the planes.
Part of the British psyche.
Yeah.
Is
to recognise that shit is because and that's what he did is he changed the painting on the planes so that people could tell good from bad, and that is people go, oh, it's not historic. I don't care. I don't care if they're flying in a DeLorean or not.
The seat patterns
on the
trains only got introduced in the 50s, Dom.
Barry, grow up, you know what I mean? Like, get a hold of yourself. Anyway.
Get alive.
That shot where he's on the beach and the explosions start flying towards him, and then it stops just before him, and that guy gets taken up in the explosion, and the sand lands all over his head.
What's the difference between the guy close up and the guy who gets blown away?
Absolutely. They are the same.
They
are the same.
In the casting, they're both referred to as soldier.
Yeah. 100%.
There's no difference.
Yeah. I don't have much to add on that other than I think it's great. And actually I love how stripped back it is as a piece. I think
that's why I say he's showing off.
Yeah. Look at what I can do. Look at what I can do with nothing being said at all. So, your irrefutable number 3.
Oppenheimer.
My number 3 is Oppenheimer.
Splendid.
Excellent.
This is what we're here for. Right,
good.
There we go.
Okay. I have lots to say, but I have actual notes here, so I'm going to read off this, try and go quickly, because I want to say all of this. So,
okay.
The more I think about it, the better it gets. The first thing to say is that I have absolutely no structural issues with it.
Not at all.
Even though it jumped around, it made perfect sense to me, and actually there were shots in colour that had previously been in black and white that I understood that the Oppenheimer perspective had caught up to the Strauss perspective. The script, I think,
so when it's
is
in black and white,
perfect.
Strauss is remembering it,
Yes.
and when it's in colour, it's Oppenheimer remembering.
Absolutely.
They're both remembering the same thing, though. Yeah.
I think the script is perfect. I don't think there's a foot wrong on the whole thing. I know it's focused in on the personal perspective of Oppenheimer. It was written famously in the first person, but it could theoretically make the whole thing feel like a smaller story, but it doesn't, because the scale of it still feels enormous and epic, and it's visually sublime. I think
Nolan said on record that he thinks Nolan, in terms of the future of the human race, was the most important man.
Do you mean Oppenheimer?
I mean Oppenheimer.
It would be incredible for Nolan to come out and go,
I was the most
I think I was
important
the
man.
most...
No. He thinks Oppenheimer is the
Like,
most...
that's how he'd say it as well. He'd go, I think I
I
was the most important person in the history of all time. I make great films.
And then
that would
like
be
a
it.
really
Left with the
tense
reporter
silence.
going like, so what's your favourite colour?
No, but he believes Oppenheimer was, in terms of the future of the human race and whether we survive as a species, the most important man to ever live.
Yeah. And that certainly makes a case for it, I think. But this is what I was going to mention earlier when we were talking about Tenet. I think one of the most genius things about it is the sound design. And because it's integral to the film,
The sound is a character in this.
Absolutely a character. It's a what it is Nolan listening, because it is a direct answer to the issues of Tenet, where you couldn't hear anything.
No, I meant to do this.
Exactly. And it's, to make sound central after everyone had an issue with it blocking things out is, number one, a great response, but number two, a really weird sort of fuck you to everyone who said bad things about Tenet.
Fuck you to Warner Brothers as well.
Well, absolutely.
It's Universal now.
Absolutely.
And Warner Brothers basically desperately said, no, we'll give you whatever you want, Christopher. Come and work with us again. And he goes, no, I'm working with Universal now.
Yeah.
You crossed me.
Yeah, exactly. No return. It's the best performance in a Nolan film since Heath Ledger.
I am ecstatic that he made this film, because I don't think he did it for this reason. It'd be quite dumb to. I'm ecstatic though that Cillian Murphy gets the lead.
Yeah, it's about time.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's about bloody time.
Yeah, but he was the perfect one for it as well, because he did start to sort of mold and shift, like he looked like Oppenheimer by the end of it. I think he disappears. I think his face being the landscape from his face being studied by those IMAX cameras
in 60mm for 3 hours.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a clever idea for Hoytema to Hoyte van Hoyte to
the big guy,
the big man.
But for reference, Hoyte van Hoytema, is he Dutch?
Yes.
With a name like that, he's got to be Dutch.
Yeah, he's like 6'4",
5, I think.
Is it? He's large.
So when they were filming, what film was it where he first did it? Was it Interstellar?
I think Interstellar, yes.
Yeah, when they were filming Interstellar, Nolan wanted a specific shot in IMAX. Yeah. And he was like, oh, but the IMAX cameras are so big, they weigh like 50 kilograms. We'll do it in 35. And Hoyte van Hoytema was like, no. And he takes it off the mount, just shoulder mounts an IMAX, and just walks with it. And just goes.
I think it does a lot of genre hopping, Oppenheimer, and the reason, I think it.
Well, it's like we said, it's Nolan does biopic, but it's Nolan does.
Yeah,
biopic,
exactly.
So it's not.
There is a horror sequence in it.
Yes.
Post Trinity,
the steps.
There is a horror sequence, exactly, and I think it was brilliant. I wish it lasted longer because I loved it. It was amazing.
It was so good.
That realization, that sort of genuine, actual sort of horrible hit of what he imagines the impact to be, whilst not having seen it, but believing
amazing
that the
choice,
words,
by the way, to not show
nothing. It's the Seven conundrum. You never see Gwyneth Paltrow's head in the box, but the idea of it being there is enough for you to be uncomfortable about it.
Also, caveat: I've seen a lot of people say that he should have used special effects for the Trinity test. One, the explosion was big enough. Yeah. Two, have you seen actual footage of the Trinity test? It's not that big.
No.
It's really not that big.
No.
It's the smallest nuclear detonation that's ever happened. And I get that you go on TikTok, and if you're like on that side of TikTok, you occasionally get top 10 biggest explosions ever, and it'll be like the Tsar Bomba, which is 50 megatons.
Right.
It's the largest explosion ever made by man.
Okay.
And the shockwave circled the Earth 3 times, and it's a massive fireball. It's really impressive, and I'm like, cool. But Trinity was
not this
1 megaton.
Yeah. Well,
or a kiloton anyway.
Yeah, because they were number one, this is a test, and two, there is a chance that we could ignite the atmosphere here.
Yes.
And they still just did it anyway.
Which leads to one of the greatest closing lines.
Yes, absolutely. The ending is bone chilling. I think we did. But that's what I mean, is again, the sound design comes into its own with that speech, because they take the sound away.
Ludwig Göransson's score
is unbelievable.
Incredible.
It's so good. The test itself, the actual test, is one of those classic Nolan set pieces where everything builds up loads of places at once, all working towards the same endpoint, and then it happens in the most devastating way possible. It's one of my favourite ever Nolan set pieces. It hit me like nothing else. Nolan loves exposition, right? In all his movies, bar Dunkirk, there's dialogue everywhere. But the instances of the dialogue being too much, so for me, Interstellar is the key outlier. But here,
it's 3 hours of only dialogue.
Yeah. And there's morals discussions happening, and there are a lot of what is actually happening. That's it. That's there's a lot of people talking in rooms, but the script is too good for me to care. It's a film that works in his favour in that he likes that side of things. It's like Elvis for Baz Luhrmann is the perfect film for Baz Luhrmann to make.
Yes.
This is the perfect topic for Nolan to go exposition heavy on. there's been stuff made about it not emotionally hitting. I disagree entirely. I think it's emotionally impactful to the max. One of my favourite bits about it, and I think it's integral to the whole film, is when he's out in the forest and Emily Blunt goes out to see him, and she says something like, "You don't get to feel guilty after you've made millions of people suffer knowingly," or something like that.
Yeah.
And that is her... That is a message that Oppenheimer takes on. And then when she's like, "Why don't you fight back?" And because he has internalized exactly what she has said, and be like, "Well, you know, there is a penance that I should be feeling right now. Yeah, I don't deserve to be doing this."
And Einstein tells him, "Now it's your turn for the consequences of your achievement." And that's a double meaning in terms of the internalized consequences, i.e. guilt.
Yeah.
And the externalized consequences, i.e. Louis Strauss.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, just because I don't have much time left, but let's just run through it really quickly.
Yeah.
Everyone was in this film because
Everyone.
and like 90% of them had 2 lines. Just because everyone wants to work with Chris Nolan.
Sure, of course.
Rami Malek delivered an excellent performance.
With
Robert
about
Downey
5
Jr.
minutes.
I hope gets a supporting Oscar.
He will. He'll get the nom, definitely.
He'll get the nom, as should Emily Blunt.
I would imagine so.
Florence Pugh, amazing performance. I think the nudity was gratuitous at points.
Okay.
I think the same effect could have been achieved with much less. I'm not talking about the interview scene when Emily Blunt's hallucinating Florence Pugh. That was perfect. I mean, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," and it's just Florence Pugh boobs right above the book, and I'm like, come on, like,
Not here.
like not here.
I know what you mean.
Let's go through it. Benny Safdie continues to amaze me at just how talented he is at everything. Cillian Murphy, performance of the year. Maybe decade. 3 hours, 60mm of that man having intense moral debates and huffing cigarettes, and it's incredible. Emily Blunt's interview.
Oh, she's amazing.
Stole the show.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Like the kind of just because she's kind of in the background for 90% of the film, and then that one scene where she finally gets to shine, you get to go, "Oh my god, no! This woman is like a force of nature. She's incredible."
Dreadful parent.
Dreadful,
but an absolute force of nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have. Do you know what I would have loved more? David Dastmalchian. Because I love David Dastmalchian.
Yeah.
Do you know what's really interesting?
What
The interview stuff.
Surprise Gary Oldman.
Yeah, surprise Gary Oldman. I was going to say this.
Which was bone chilling, by the way.
Yeah, I was
he
like,
says, "I think I have blood on my hand," and he offers in a handkerchief.
Yeah.
Which Truman was, by the way, an asshole in real life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Absolute dick.
Knob.
There is no reason to drop the nuclear bomb in Japan. That's a controversial viewpoint. Because the whole argument for doing it is if the Americans invaded Japan, it would be 100 million deaths, mostly civilians, mostly GIs, mostly Japanese soldiers. There's a lot of documents that suggest the emperor was planning to surrender anyway, but you don't, because he was motivated primarily by a Russian invasion of Manchuria, as was Truman, goes the other argument. But regardless, it happened. We'll never know what would have happened otherwise. It's the only time a nuclear bomb's been dropped in anger. And we saw the results. I mean, there's still casualties today in the forms of higher cancer rates.
Yeah.
What else? The structure of the film, I've never been more amazed by how... Like, I've never been more impressed anyway, because I feel like films are detached from reality in a lot of ways. And your life is not a hero's journey, right? You will never experience a range of emotions in such a satisfying succession as a film gives you, because they are structured in such a way to give you that punch.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer manages to, by covering I think like 5 different timelines, it manages to give you his entire life story in 3 hours. His entire life experience.
Absolutely,
in a way that doesn't feel like a traditional 3-act structure, and I love it for that.
Yeah, it's great. I have 3 very quick things to say about Oppenheimer, because I'm aware, but 2 and 1, we know what they are, and we have very little to add. So, number 1, the idea of raindrops falling and creating holes being the idea of making holes in the atmosphere. I love. It's
Brilliant.
very visual.
And at the end of the scene, at the end of the film as well, when the raindrops are falling, it's no longer holes in the atmosphere, but it's thermonuclear detonations.
Yeah, absolutely. The second thing is that there's several taps on the shoulder. Obviously, American Prometheus, the book it's based on, but also I think there is a tap on the shoulder from The Dark Knight, and this is what I was talking about when the music carries over from one scene to the next. It does it again in this, which again makes it flow through and feel like we're watching his life, we're not watching that 3-act structure that you were talking about. I also think there's a tap on the shoulder from The Imitation Game, which is misunderstood genius goes through, and actually there are consequences beyond what he thought he was just being set. There were things he didn't anticipate he was going to have to think about afterwards. I think obviously it's 5 times better than the Imitation Game, but
and
I think
Oppenheimer does a great job of because I feel like people need this to be explained to them in the current culture, and I don't mean like cancel culture bad.
Right.
Like if bad people are bad, you're like
Yeah,
we should know they're bad.
Yes.
The problem is, the film knows he's a terrible fucking guy.
Yeah.
He's an awful guy. He's a womanizer. He tries to poison his professor at Cambridge. He invents the tools with which, at some point, we may destroy ourselves. He's responsible for the deaths of 200,000 people directly.
Yeah.
This is a really bad guy.
Not good.
This is a really, really terrible guy. There is, however, just because I saw it pointed out and it really made me chuckle, there's always one line in a Christopher Nolan film that's really dumb and it really throws me off.
Right.
And it's when Matt Damon, him and Matt Damon are trying to, who's also great, by the way,
great.
are trying to convince a scientist to join up, and he's like, oh, how about, because this is the most important thing to ever happen in the history of the world. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
Did they say that?
What are you talking about?
The last thing I have to say on it is the script of the interrogation is almost word for word the transcript of the interrogation.
Seriously?
I watched a documentary on Oppenheimer and they reenacted the transcript and it is almost word for word what the actual interview is like. And yet it's played out so dramatically that it feels like it's created.
Another minor thing is about halfway through the film, in all of the POVs, Oppenheimer, about halfway through, stops talking about physics. There's not another mention. Right. He becomes Oppenheimer, the politician.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I just think is
Oppenheimer, the Time cover.
The Time cover, yeah.
Right.
But I wish we had more time to talk about
I wish we had more time, but the basic premise of Oppenheimer is, I think it's his best film in a long, long time, and I think it deserves all the credit it's getting. So number 2, what do you have there?
I had Inception.
I've got Inception.
We spoke about it last time.
I've had a change of heart today.
Okay.
In that I've gone for Inception at number 2.
Which, well, let's just say now.
I wrote an essay on Inception, and so I watched it a bunch of times. I still love it. It's still like my favourite film ever, tied with... Side note, I saw Edgar Wright yesterday and I spoke to him, and I was like, oh my god! Anyway, it's tied with my favourite film ever, and it's so there's so much to say about it. Like, it's just pure... It's cinema contained in one film in terms of what it shows and what it talks about. I love it, but I've chosen today to go for number 1, The Prestige, because...
Which is my number...
Your number 2, right? Because the more I think about it, the more I go, you have created a story that is realistically about 2 people, and that you have expanded it into a story that is actually about 5. And I can't quite believe that you decided to pick the best elements of Memento and Insomnia and Batman Begins and go, sod it, all 3 of them are going to be the genesis of this film, and that is where I'm going to make my salt. And every time I watch it, the emotional impact is worse, and I think it's more...
Nolan gets undue flack, I think, for being quite a cold director, which I think is just completely unnecessary. Because how can you watch the scene where Fisher reconnects with his father,
right?
Or Murph, or Cooper gets back to Murph on her deathbed, and say that this man's unemotional?
It makes no sense. Makes no sense at all.
Like, I get it's not quite like Greta Gerwig levels of like unhinged feminine rage. But
I think it comes from people who just watched The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Because obviously, because it's a comic book movie, as in every comic book movie, and I will stand by this to the day I die, in most cases, the emotion of it is lowered because of the heightened state of everything else. You have to work really hard to make the death of Aunt May something that actually emotionally hits me. You have to build her character up. You have to make me like her first.
I mean, in Infinity War, when Spider-Man's disintegrating, that's all down to Tom Holland's performance. Nothing in the writing made that a hard hitter. Yeah, like that's just all Tom Holland being a very good actor.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are sat with number 1 as Interstellar.
Yes, still. And just because of the reason that it's the only Nolan film I've cried at.
Yeah. Listen, there's so much. I watched it again recently. There's so much I love about Interstellar.
It's beautiful.
It looks
like visually
unbelievable, and I bet I didn't see it in IMAX when it came out. But if I had, I would have lost my mind.
It was loud.
Yeah,
it was very loud.
There's just too much in it where I go, and the reason why it was at number 10 for me,
it's bloated.
11 for me, it's bloated, and also I the things like silly things as well, because most of it isn't silly, and then there's parts of it that are like welcome. And then there's a rocket behind a wall.
Yeah.
And it's that's like, who was planning this?
Line. It's like, we're NASA. The same NASA that you flew for. Like, is there going to be a different NASA? Like, what are you talking about? And then there's like Saturn V behind the wall. And it's like...
Yeah, I know. And Just remind me how black holes again, how they work one more time. Just because I know we're approximately 10 minutes away from the black hole. But you could just tell me how they work one more time.
Because
that's like a pilot. Let me remind you. Ladies and gentlemen, I just remind you. I don't know how to fly this plane.
Remind you for the 47th time. There's black holes in this film. No, it's Cooper going back to Murph and the stupid fucking 2 chords that Hans Zimmer plays for the whole of that scene will always break me, and that's why it's number 1, because I like it. Screw you.
Fair enough. Listen, the score is one of my favourite Nolan scores, easily.
Absolutely.
That's 1 to 12. We've had to rush the last one.
We have had to rush the last one. This is because I have to go.
Our 12 to 1.
It's my fault.
It's fine. Michael's got work. It's
right, so I'll do mine first.
Okay.
So 12 to 1, we have Following, then Insomnia, then Tenet, Dark Knight Rises, Memento, Batman Begins, Dunkirk, The Dark Knight, Inception, Oppenheimer, Prestige, Interstellar. However, Insomnia was at the bottom and Following was 11 because I reordered this when I sat down.
Okay.
So that's not the order I said it in. That's what I have in front of me.
Alright, okay, cool. I have at 12, The Dark Knight Rises, 11, Following, 10, Interstellar, 9, Insomnia, 8, Tenet, 7, Batman Begins, 6, Memento, 5, The Dark Knight, 4, Dunkirk, 3, Oppenheimer, 2, Inception, and today, number 1, The Prestige, but those 2 can flip around any day.
Yeah, like I said, my top 6.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 out of 12. For the top 6 to be interchangeable, it's a pretty good track record.
Yeah, exactly. I think it just proves that most of these films are pretty bloody good.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Love doing this. Missed this.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will be back more regularly. I know you won't be waiting for another 4 months. Recommendation of the week, I'm going to say Barbie because people need to see it if they haven't, and it is really good fun. I will talk about it more.
I felt aimed.
It wasn't just you.
I'm going to do a recommendation this week. Screw it. It's Princess Mononoke because
what a film.
I watched a video on it last night.
What a film. It was in my Netflix 10 recommendations episode. So
do it, man.
Go and do it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
See you again very soon. And bye.